Well, here we are in the Maritime Museum of San Diego, and it's noted for being probably one of the most important maritime museums on the entire west coast of North America. We date from about the middle of the 1920s, when the Star of India, which we consider to be the flagship of our fleet, arrived here from Alameda in the Bay Area. She'd just been retired from the Alaska Packers, and she'd had a varied career as an immigrant vessel, as a trading vessel to India, involved in the lumber trade in the Pacific Ocean, and then finally her last stage of her career was transporting fishermen and supplies up to Alaska and then bringing canned salmon back from Alaska up until about the middle of the 1920s or so. A group of amateurs got together and brought her down here to San Diego, and they funded that voyage and they established her here as part of what would be known as the Bayside Aquarium. Now that actually never happened, but at one point the Star of India and this museum was associated with the zoo here in San Diego. Fell on hard times during the 1930s with the Great Depression and World War II, and there was talk about her being scrapped or at least being relegated to a forgotten part of the bay here in San Diego. And then in the 1950s into the early 1960s, groups of, again, amateur enthusiasts got together and they restored her to the point where she could sail for the first time in many years in 1976. So the Star of India is considered to be kind of like the backbone or the heart and soul of our museum. The Star of India is considered to be kind of like the backbone or the heart and soul of our museum, but it's not the only thing you see when you come here to San Diego to visit this museum. We have on board, for example, an 1898 ferry boat, the Berkeley, which once plied the waters between Oakland and San Francisco in the Bay Area. She assisted in the evacuation of refugees from San Francisco after the 1906 earthquake. So she is very much a part of coastal history, of maritime history here in California. We also have a steam yacht that is dating from the early 20th century, the Medea, just next to us here. She is part of also the story of steam propulsion here on the west coast, and in fact beyond that in the Atlantic world and northern Europe as well. And then we have various other vessels too, like the San Salvador, probably one of the most recent additions to our fleet, which was constructed here in San Diego and launched and is now part of our education program, our interpretive program that focuses on the story of Spanish expansion in the Pacific Ocean in the early 16th century. All these vessels work together as kind of like a living museum. And what we want to talk about today also is what's found inside these vessels. One of the portions of the museum's collection that is really, really extraordinary are the ship models that we have on display here. These models are works of art. They're also highly technical and in many cases very, very accurate renditions of the real thing. And we use them for a number of purposes. We use them, first of all, just to reflect the artistry and the skill that's involved in producing scale models. Models that represent the real thing, either the real thing, like a model of, say, for example, the Cutty Sark, which you'll find over on the Star of India. The real Cutty Sark still exists, but we have a model that represents it here. Or models of vessels that no longer exist, like, for example, the HMS Endeavour of Captain Cook. That's also here on board the Berkeley. We have upwards of about 1,500 models in our collection, and their origins vary according to what they were designed for. Some, for example, were produced as identification models during World War II to help naval personnel to identify either friendly or enemy vessels. Others were produced pretty much in conjunction with the mission of the museum, that of interpreting the world of the Pacific Ocean, the maritime history of the Pacific Ocean. So as you walk through the various galleries that you find here at the museum, you'll see representative models that tell not just the story of the skill of the model maker or describe the accurate rendition of the real vessel. They're also telling a story in terms of the place of that vessel or the place of that model within an overall history of the Pacific Ocean. So we have models that tell the story of exploration, models that tell the story of the Second World War, models that tell the story of developments and changes in naval architecture. And all these work together to explain the overall history and maritime culture of the Pacific Ocean. So every month we have a group of members of the museum and volunteers who are also members of the Model Ship Guild here in San Diego. And some of them come from quite a distance, from Los Angeles area right down to San Diego, in order to be with other fellow modelers. And they talk together about some of their projects. They bring them in to show the other members. They share techniques in model building, some of which are incredibly fine. And then they move on to have some time together just to chat about their hobby or their interest. The guild itself was founded way back in 1971 and initially met on the Star of India and then migrated over here to the ferryboat Berkeley. Initially, it was a group of volunteers, again associated with the museum, who were fascinated by the idea of creating models and of honing their skills and learning from each other. And that's pretty much what the modelers do today. Decades later, is they learn from each other, some of whom are really internationally recognized modelers. Some have printed books or published books on the subject. Some have exhibited, for example, in the Smithsonian Institution, and others have prominent places here in our own collection. So we're really very, very fortunate to have a group of such skilled and enthusiastic model makers here in San Diego who contribute to the museum, support the museum by repairing models, occasionally crafting models for our exhibits, when models are brought in, for example, by members of the public that need repairs and so on. Some members will actually do that. At other occasions, we have models in our collection that maybe need some sort of refurbishment, cleaning and that sort of thing, and we can rely on these same individuals to actually work on them with skill and with dexterity.
Welcome to the model shop here on the ferryboat Berkeley, which is part of the collection of the Maritime Museum of San Diego's fleet. This model shop is run by the San Diego Ship Modelers Guild, of which I currently have the honor of being the guild master. We were founded in 1971 over on the Star of India. The kind of genesis of our guild was simple origins. You had two model makers who were working on one kit, and they had questions for each other. And they thought, well, why don't we get together and we can share our knowledge and work on this kit. and one of them owned a hobby shop here in San Diego, and so word kind of got around that, hey, we're going to get together on the Star of India, we're going to share our knowledge, we're going to kind of come together, ship modelers, and no one really thought of much of it until it was kind of a great time, and they thought we should continue to do this. So this was held on the Star of India during her renovation years here at the museum, and so they asked for permission, can we do this regularly? It was brought up to the museum board of directors, who said, absolutely, as long as you join the Nautical Research Guild, which is an excellent institution for anyone who's into ship modeling. So we are a proud charter member of the NRG, and since 1971 have been meeting here at the museum. We no longer meet on the Star of India. We are now here on the Berkeley for our monthly meetings. Every second Tuesday of the month at 6 o'clock sharp, until 8 o'clock. We meet on the upper deck here. But when we're not meeting, you can often find members right here in the model shop. So again, when the Guild was founded, we were over on the Star of India because the Berkeley was not here. So when the Berkeley came and they renovated, and you're putting in exhibits, what better way to have an exhibit than have a living one? So right now, this is my log keeper from the Guild, Isaac Wills. He's working here on doing a restoration of a donated model. Now, this is not one of the museum's exhibit pieces, but rather something from a private collection that came here and was donated. This is a pretty common story for ships here in the model shop. Someone will have spent a lifetime gathering skills, building these ships, and they'll be in families, and someone will pass away and suddenly they've got the ship and they don't have the knowledge to repair it. They'll bring it down here, sometimes for donation, and sometimes to ask for repairs so that it can stay in the family. So arrangements are made, and so over here on the bench is our kind of center stage for doing restoration work. During museum hours, whenever we have a representative from the Guild here, this is where you'll find them working. This is a great opportunity, as this work that we want to do is getting done, to allow people to see what we do. If you don't see a model ship being built, it can be a bit of a mystery. That's how I came to be here in the Guild. I was working here at the museum. I had never built a ship model in my life, but I thought it was one of the coolest things ever. And I walked by, admired the work, and then I said the famous words, I could never do that. And then in that chair right now where Isaac is sitting was a former member of our Guild, Bob Duncan. Bob Duncan was kind of a monolith in this model shop. He drove 40 miles each way into his 90s to be down here 3 days a week to be able to share his knowledge with people going by. And when he heard me say those words, I couldn't do this, he said, oh, no. Anyone can do this. It takes time, it takes patience, but you can develop the skills. He sat me down, we flipped through a catalog, he found a model that he said, this is a perfect one to start with, and that's how I got my start. So you don't have to know everything to come down here and work in the model shop, to be a member of the Guild. All you have to do is be interested and be willing to learn. So if you come down here, you'll see, like I said, repairs being made. This right here, this is the center stage for right now. This is the model. Most of our repairs often have to do with rigging. So you can see here all of the mess of wire. Versus up here, we can see everything that has been restored, how neatly it's all put together. The rigging is often the first thing to go on a model that hasn't been stored away in a case. So that's often the work that you'll see being done here, but we do all sorts of repairs. We don't work exclusively in wood either. For all of you that are interested in, for instance, World War II ships, there's a lot of plastic kits that are available, and there are also people who kit bash, and those who work from scratch. There is no one right way to build a model. The only thing that matters is that you enjoy the process. So the model shop here does support the museum's models. So from time to time, Kevin Sheehan, who is the person in charge of all the exhibits, Occasionally he will bring a model that is in need of a little bit of cleaning, a little bit of upkeep, and we will offer our services here for the museum. But mostly it is private donations and private requests for restoration. We currently, as you look around the shop, you'll see a lot are models that are in, from everything from minor dusting to complete re-rigging needs. Every model has a different need, so it's the job of the modeler to assess what needs to be done, lay out a plan, and then becomes the work, putting it all together. And again, you're always on view here for the public, able to answer questions for them. We actually here make small model kits. We keep a little stash down here of little mini stars of India. This was a project that the Guild did just for fun years ago. And then we thought maybe there's a little something more to this. So we worked together to make little tiny wooden hulls painted with a toothpick jaboom to start out. And then we give these to kids. They're able to build put in their fore, main, and mizzen masts. And then there's a little sail plan that they can cut out and tape or glue to this. And quite frankly, it's a great way to start a conversation with someone who looks at that and, like me, says, I couldn't possibly do that. Well, maybe not yet, but start small. And so we have a lot of children that have been interested in this, and so we actually have members of the Guild that are as young as 12, with others even younger that are potentially interested in joining. Isaac was actually one of our youngest members when he joined, and he's loved it so much that he's gone on to become a naval architect to help design real ships using the skills he started learning right here in the model shop. So a lot of the tools that we use oftentimes are those that carpenters would use. So they're just smaller table saws, smaller band saws. But since a lot of a ship appearance really comes down to the rigging, I mean, that's what really makes it pop, makes it look intricate. And that really comes down to really fine details. So Isaac, would you like to share some of the tools you are using working on the rig here of this restoration?
Of course. So right now I'm working on a restoration of a British revenue cutter, and right now I'm working on the rig. So I'm restoring the braces for the yards, and then I'll be turning it around to do the rest of the vessel. Once I complete that, I'll be then dusting and restoring the model to looking new. So one thing that I use quite frequently for the rigging process is very, very simple, but very, very essential, and that's a good pair of tweezers. You'll also see I have some very small scissors. These can cut lines of any diameter at a very close range, which makes it very simple to trim up any extra lines that are not part of the rig. So, for example, I can take this little tail here, snip it off, and it's gone. Another thing that's very essential are small blades. Very common are number 11 X-Acto blades. They're exceptionally important for removing pieces from the sprues that the wooden plates can get put into. It is essential for fine detail work and carving, as well as, again, trimming lines, and, they can even be used as sort of an awl to start a pilot hole, and then from there you can use a pin vise to drill the rest of the hole out so you can place an eye or a deck cleat or whatever it is you might be using to work on your model. On a more uncommon note, things that you wouldn't necessarily think to be used as tools can very much so be used as exactly that. Foam lining with an adhesive back can be used to make cradles such as this, so you have a secure place to leave your model, and it provides a cushion so that no damage gets to your hull, especially if you're doing a wooden planked model and you've sanded it very smooth and fine. This prevents any damage or scratching from occurring on the bottom of your vessel. On the note of different ways of working on your models, you can find strange pieces of foam like this that can be glued or nailed down to a baseboard, and you can put them side by side, and it will provide a snug jacket for the keel to sit down into. Or you could even do it the other way, and it will, if you have a rounder hull or a flat bottomed hull, it will sit just in like that and provide a very steady workplace for your model to be displayed in while you're working on it. So, doing detail work on these models, one thing that can be very straining and difficult is working on these very intricately small details, sometimes as small as the head of a needle. There was one model I was working on where I fashioned a ship's bell out of the head of a nail. For working on intricate details like that, these goofy goggles you see here are essential to making sure that you can work at that very fine detail level without straining your eyes, and so you can do things accurately and represent the ship as it would be in real life. Other examples of things like this are this clamp here that comes with a magnifying glass, where if you're tying fine knots and working on rigging, and let's say you're preparing deadeyes and lanyards for a shroud, you can take a piece of line, extend it between the two clamps, and hold up the magnifying glass, hands-free, so you can properly rig the accurate way to set up the shrouds.
Speaking of our origins over on the Star of India, this is the Star of India, a model of the ship as she is currently rigged, which is as a bark. So this is a ship in a bottle model, which is admittedly a dying art. Very few people actually will go through the length of building the model in a way that it can be put into the bottle. But it's also a great crowd pleaser. People love seeing this. So, and the Star of India means something very special to Isaac and I personally, on top of the guild connection. We both sail crew that actually work on the Star of India for when she goes out and sails. It's admittedly a rare event, saved for big momentous occasions. This year, 2023, she turns 160 years old, and we will be out there working on the ship. So Isaac, you started out as a model maker and then went and became a sailor. I did the opposite. I started learning to sail, came in as a model ship. So how did it work for you? Is there a translation between going from model to the actual one-to-one scale real thing?
Absolutely. So again, I've been volunteering in the model shop here since I was about 14 years old, and I started with very small, very basic plastic model kits and such. Revell, Heller, again, stuff who've been in modeling for a long time, we're all very familiar with. And through working here at the model shop and developing my skills, it was at one point the first mate of the Star of India, Jim Davis, came by and noticed that I was here all the time, and he invited me to join the sail and maintenance crew. So I started off with the sail and maintenance crew in 2018 when I was of age, and from there I started basic stuff, scraping paint, varnishings, and later on I developed my skills to the point where I became qualified to climb the rig and work on rigging projects, and again, do what I do at scale in real life. The only difference is I no longer have to imagine myself being a tiny little man climbing the rig. I get to be that man. So that has been an immense and wonderful experience for me. So first example that comes to mind is in the past when I've done rigging, the instinct for me was, oh, I'll just do a square knot and call it good. Through sail crew, I've been taught how to do rolling hitches, bowlines, all sorts of sailor knots, and more advanced stuff such as decorative knots, as well as different types of seizings, which are the proper and actual way to fasten your shrouds and lanyards to each other. So for example, here we can see there are two seizings around the bight of a backstay. I would have never known to do that prior to working on sail crew. I would have just tied a square knot at the end and called it a day. But working on the real thing has allowed me to institute the proper and actual ways of ship construction into these models, bringing them to a much greater definition of realism. This is also transferred back into sail crew as well. Starting out with models, there were things where I was familiar with all these lines and what they did, but joining sail crew, that allowed me to put a name to the face. So before I would have just said these were the yard adjustment lines, but now I know that they're called the braces and the vangs and the halyards and the sheets, and I can put a name to all of these different things. Then I can retranslate that back into ship modeling to achieve an even higher level of detail in these models. Another thing that's really great about ship modeling is you can do everything from the exceptionally tiny to the exceptionally large. Here I have a large-scale model of, as I mentioned before, a colonial revenue cutter. prior to this, I would start working on smaller things like this. This is a 1 to 1200 scale model of the B-39, which is a Soviet submarine that was here at the museum for quite some time. This was one of my first scratch-built models made entirely of wood, and I built it, say, 10 years ago. I don't remember, honestly. But it was a really great experience to get to work on something so small and minute and find different ways to put the detail in there, even though I would require making these massively small pieces. And now I can work on these larger things where any part of this vessel may be the size of this model I made before, standing at only about 2.5–3 inches long.